have gender-based expectations around work in the home, from housework and childcare through to mental load tasks, changed during your lifetime or your parents' lifetimes? What improvements do you think we still need to see?
So I think they've done a huge 180. I think that when my mum was raising me, there was a lot of strides being taken and a lot of women working very hard to push for gender equality. But I think my experiences with my husband are very different. So I've always been hugely ambitious. He knew exactly what he was getting into when we met and got married. And when I had our daughter, I went back to work full time when she was 4.5 months old. I travelled all over, so you didn't have the luxury of some of my friends' husbands who hadn't changed a nappy and hadn't done that. But I think that's really against the norm now. I think that if a man was to stand up and say, absolutely, I don't help my partner, I don't change nappies, and they do all the night feeds and things like that, I think that would be against the norm as it was, as it should be, because it's a fair thing. So key tips that I can suggest, I think it's all about communication. You've got to be very clear. I mean, we ran our lives like a military operation in some ways. We had joint calendars, who was traveling where, who was picking up, and, being super organized, getting things done the night before and trying to minimize the stress. But, communication is key, knowing that it's difficult, but also really listening to each other, I think, is incredibly important. And taking turns, sharing the tasks, making dinner. I mean, I think one of the best things that really helped me was that, either on the Saturday or the Sunday, I got a long lie. So, working hard during the week, I knew that I would have one day when I wasn't, getting up at 3 o'clock to get on a 6 a.m. at Heathrow, and I would just be able to kind of wake up easily, take my time, have copious amounts of tea and coffee, and before I had to, immediately be awake and on top of absolutely everything. So I think we formed a real partnership that's continued to this day. And I think it's about respect and, understanding that both your careers are important and both of you are ambitious and motivated, but, really communicating when it is absolutely essential that I get on that flight to Zurich, even though my little one or my son has chicken pox, or also that, that when my husband had a conference or something that was really important for him to do. And I think one of the biggest lessons I learned was I spent a lot of time when my kids were younger, feeling guilty that I wasn't with them, feeling guilty that I wasn't giving my all at work because I was missing them, and really taking time to, understand when I was working, I was really working hard. I knew they were well looked after, well cared for. Didn't mean I didn't miss them, but also when I was at home, trying to minimise the time that I spend, on the laptop in front of them, if I've been away for chunks of the week as well, and being blessed enough to have that flexibility. So communicate, listen to each other, support each other, and just remember that everybody's trying their best. Forgiveness and compassion goes a long way. Thank you.
Things have improved, but not enough. From my personal experience, my husband took over the primary care responsibilities for our daughter when she was 4 months old. We were moving to Sweden with my job, so I was unable to do it. And in Sweden at that time, due to the shared parental leave that was already in place, there was no childcare available for us. So my husband took it on, initially for 6 months, but 10 years later, he's still doing it. I think one thing that's helped tremendously has been at various points he's had a really solid support network of other men also taking on the childcare responsibilities, and they've been able to support each other and give each other support along the way, and that's been really important. I think the other thing I'd reflect on is that you need to keep talking. You need to keep assessing whether what you're doing is right for you and adjusting along the way.
Most of us struggle to maintain work-life balance, and everyone's definition of what this is and what being successful at work is will be different. What does a successful work-life balance mean for you, and what are your top tips for those looking to achieve this? Does having children make it more difficult to be successful at work?
I believe that managing work-life balance is an ongoing process. At times you may feel you've got it right, but then something will change, whether it's you changing as you get older or circumstances changing. And I think you need to constantly reevaluate, have you got the balance right for you? I think these days it's more about an integration with smartphones and availability potentially 24/7. It's really about saying, how do you find that integration that works best for you? And as that changes over time, acknowledging it and changing what you do and how you do it. I think a key thing here is enlisting close family and friends to the ways that you're doing that. So, for example, if you say, I'm going to switch off my devices at 9 o'clock in the evening, if people know that, they can support you and won't be surprised when you don't reply to that text message. But it is changing, and I think COVID has certainly made a lot of us reevaluate what we thought we had as good practices before, because lots of things have been thrown up in the air. So things do change, and keep reevaluating and making adjustments as needed.
Getting the right work-life balance for anybody is difficult, whether you've got kids or not. I think it is particularly hard for parents. There's always going to be something you're going to miss. And I think when you become a parent, you don't really give that an awful lot of thought. But fairly quickly, once they start school, you do realise there's stuff that you probably have to miss. And there's certainly certain things that you're not able to get to. I think that's a real challenge. And I think the key thing now, one of the things that I would always say is don't kick yourself. There will be other stuff that you can get to. And I think with that, you need to work out kind of what your no compromise is. So when I say what's your no compromise, I think the things that you absolutely will not miss. And I think you need to be clear on that. I think you need to be open and honest with your employer about that as well. And hopefully if you've got a good line manager, they'll understand and they'll appreciate the fact that you're being open with the things that you're not prepared to compromise on. So I think that's really important. For me, it's also about having a supportive partner. Having that partner who is going to be able to cover things, to step in when I can't get there, or when she's not able to get there, and I can cover things and I can step in and make sure that we have some sort of parental representation. I think one of the key things for sort of success measures, though, is if you're looking at getting a successful work-life balance, actually that's going to vary from everybody, from person to person, from family to family, and whatever you think it looks like, and be clear on what you think is right and stick with that. Don't ever judge yourself against other parents. Other parents have got weird and wonderful, wacky lives like the rest of us, and there's lots of stuff that we all do differently. And I think sometimes there's sort of a peer pressure as a parent. You can't help but compare yourself to what other people are doing, and the fact that both parents always turn up for all of the events, and and you're not able to do that on the odd occasion, and then that can be tricky. And I think removing yourself from that and not even thinking that is a great thing to do.
A lot of progress has been made in the last 20 years, and we've seen that as men take up more responsibilities at home, it enables their partners to take more opportunities at work. However, the evidence is showing that the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic is setting some of this back, as women are often taking on the brunt of homeschooling and childcare duties, while their partners work relatively normal hours. How do you think COVID-19 has impacted gender equality, and what can we do to stop it widening the gap we've worked so hard to close?
So with regards to, obviously, the COVID crisis in 2020, something I don't think any of us expected or foresaw, and the impact that I think that that's going to have on the employment landscape, but also on gender inequality, I think that there's going to be some real substantial changes and a large detrimental effect to gender parity because of this. And I think certainly, reading the articles in The Guardian, almost a couple of months into the COVID-19 crisis reflected that, where, the fact that over the past 20 years, we've taken great strides forward with gender equality, from, the pay gap and, equal opportunities. But by the same token, this article referred to the fact that we may actually be pushed back by up to 50 years because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And this is something that's reflected in a recent survey that the HBA had actually undertaken. So 88% of our members who work for corporate partners, really felt that the companies had gone out their way to support them, either with flexible working or all kinds of initiatives to make them feel supported. But 47% of our HBA members who were, surveyed said that they felt that longer term, this pandemic was going to have a huge impact, not just on their ability to work, but also their health and their chances to, continue working and be promoted. given all the additional household responsibilities that need to be undertaken at this time, especially by homeschooling or looking after and really trying to protect elderly parents, from all walks of life at this stage. And actually, we ran a series of, initiatives and calls over the summer with our members in the UK London chapter. And there was a real need for people to get together, let off some steam, share ideas, feel supported, and come up with inventive ways to try and get through, especially the period in lockdown where everyone was unsure of exactly what was happening and what to do. So while I think that there's been a huge amount of detrimental, effects of the COVID crisis across the board, I suppose one of the positives, if any, that we can take from it is that, by this flexible working model being much more, approachable, and companies are seeing that they're working, and a lot of big pharma are coming out and really allowing, their employees, male and female, to decide, the best way for them to work flexibly or not to achieve their goals and objectives. So in some ways, the flexible working will level the playing field. We won't continue to bear the brunt of the childcare and homeschooling needs, as is referenced in pretty much every single article that I've read so far. And hopefully our partners will continue to, really support, our careers, and that we continue to make progress to get back to the new normal, to allow us to move forward and get back to really driving gender parity forward. Thank you.
So we're all learning from COVID and how to work in this new world. And this has brought some opportunities, but also some real challenges, and I have some concerns. In terms of the opportunities, the move to working predominantly online does offer a degree of democratisation in terms of women being able to access meetings that perhaps they weren't able to access before because of duties at home. And also the platforms themselves allow for a democratisation within meetings with chat functions and raising hands, etc. So these opportunities need to be explored further and work out how to really maximise the use of them. The move away from breakfast meetings and dinner meetings to actually doing things online is potentially very helpful. However, there are some real concerns, and we're seeing data emerging about the disproportionate effect of the pandemic and the way it's made us all work over the last few months on women. A study undertaken by University College London showed that actually, when you look at primary school parents, women have done the majority of the homeschooling, with women doing on average 5 hours a day of homeschooling compared to men doing around 2. And then women also doing about another 3 hours of developmental activity compared to men doing less than 2 on average. If we look at science in particular, there's been a disproportionate effect with differences in the number of publications being recorded, so men submitting many more papers for publication than women, and the reason for this being thought because women are still taking up the majority of childcare duty. So I think this needs looking at really carefully, and I think employers have a duty actually to look at what are they assuming and how are they asking people to work in their workforce, and do they really understand the disproportionate effects of those home responsibilities on women and what's happening for individual employees.
As a younger professional, how far do you think we have come in sharing household and caring tasks, reducing the stigma around maternity and paternity leave, and finding work-life balance that works for men and women, employees and employers? What else would you like to see change in the next decade?
Among my social group that I met through university and subsequently during my 7-year career, and especially in my household where, we're building a household between myself and my boyfriend, I feel like household jobs are being shared more equally between men and women, maybe compared to before. I think it's, more divided by who's good at doing what, who likes doing what. For example, I'm good at, I think, and I like cleaning. It's therapeutic for me. Whereas my boyfriend is good at other things, like, emptying the vacuum cleaner or, vacuuming the house. So it's really divided by meritocracy in a way. But also, who does more of what? I think it also depends on, it doesn't necessarily mean that because I'm good at cleaning the house, I'd always clean the house, and because my boyfriend's good at cooking, he'd always cook. It's more fluid than that. I think it depends on availability, because we're all very busy these days in the modern world, but also well-being, based on physical and mental health. If one person's feeling better than the other one, they might do more of the housework right now until, it flips the other way around. So I think it's more fluid, and people are used to that as well. As much as the social pressure and motherly expectations are towards women, that they have to be at home or they have to be taking care of children, I think the stigma around the traditional characteristics of a man, that they should be going out more or spending less time with their children, rather, spending more time at work, or they need to be disciplining their children rather than being friendly, I think that's completely being challenged. I think there is more of an expectation that fathers are more involved in childcare, and also I see this around my friends and people that I met through my career as well. I can probably divide my life into 3 stages, growing up in 3 different locations, different countries. The first 10 years of my life was spent in South Korea with both my parents working, and it was fairly typical that I and many other children grew up with their grandparents or caregivers as parents worked into the night. That was very common for you to work from Monday to Sunday, from 8 a.m. till 10 p.m. and beyond. And although there was less such pressure for my mum, who had her own business, my dad was traveling almost half the time of the year, so he was gone more than 150 days a year, as far as I can remember. And quite often there were after-work dinners and get-togethers with people that you work. So I think there was a lot of pressure culturally in the workplace that you have to be really committed to the work, and maybe at the expense of the time that you spend with your family. And when I moved to New Zealand, this took a 180-degree turn. It definitely felt more relaxed, both as a child of my parents and also when I eventually started working in New Zealand. And this, of course, is probably a massive generalization. And to be honest, it doesn't necessarily mean that people aren't ambitious in New Zealand. They're extremely ambitious. They're extremely driven. And I know plenty of people who are so driven, they would always give it their 120% in whatever role they are. But there was definitely more of an expectation that you have a work-life balance in New Zealand than in Korea. But equally, the Korea that I knew, 20 years ago may be completely different to the Korea now. So, there's always that caveat as well, that it's always changing, it's very dynamic. And I guess the third and last stage of my life so far is living in the UK. People work extremely hard in the UK too, and I feel like there is a bit of some people might not agree, but I think there is more of a hustling culture in the UK than in New Zealand, where longer hours are slightly more praised than back home where I'm from. Still, I think here in the UK, as long as you can prove that you're doing your job well and you're achieving, there is definitely a degree of flexibility when it comes to working arrangements and having a work-life balance. When it comes to gender parity and enabling greater gender parity, I think microaggressions and social conditioning from a young age are 2 big problems that I've experienced personally. I still see too many people in the workplace and in social settings where, the boy job, girl job gets mentioned, or gender stereotypes are spoken like a joke. And these microaggressions often are uncomfortable. I didn't quite know why they were uncomfortable before I, got into this whole gender parity thing. But this is not okay if it makes people uncomfortable, and we should be able to speak up in such settings, and feel like it's a safe environment and address the issues, have nuanced conversations about sensitive topics, whether it be with your friends, your workmates, with your family, whatever it is.
Hi, my name is Lorenzo Rimoldi. I'm a husband, a father of a 9-month-old son, and I work as a lead consultant at Your Business Partner. As a young professional, I believe that we arrived to a good level of sharing household responsibilities and childcare, especially for young couples. A lot of work has been done by government, civil society and employers in these regards. And in terms of what I would like to see for the future as a wish, I believe like two things. The first is always more flexible work hours, so that parents can manage to organize their personal life and at the same time meet expectations at work. And the second is the consolidation, the strengthening of a network around the family. And I think in this regard, government can also do more, and also the employer can do more. Well, thank you very much for watching the video. We hope you liked it. See you soon.